Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mike Carlson.
I'm Brian Husband.
And this is The View from the U. Brian, another big week in college sports, another big week in college football. Give us the rundown.
All right, first we're going to talk upsets because last week we said those two words, and of course you are the kiss of death in college football, those two words, ho-hum. No such sort of a week this week. We got massive upsets. Let's begin. Let's start with Mississippi State. Big SEC matchup with LSU, top 10 team, just walking into Louisiana and kicking these guys.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the LSU team, that of old, Brian, where we saw, where they would win national titles and, would develop a lot of great prospects. This is an LSU team that is very beatable, and Mississippi State proved that. They're not an SEC powerhouse anymore. Mississippi State being able to walk in and beat them, I mean, you can't ask for more if you're Mississippi State's coach, but LSU, you got a couple problems to fix and a couple holes to fill.
Yeah, I think this is a great thing for the program because it really was so much of a reputation game coming in because Mississippi State not making a huge splash. They're not going to be the ranked team that they were a few years ago. But LSU, I feel like they kind of got, at least some of that high rank was on reputation. The other bit was from beating Wisconsin.
Exactly. And, you talk about reputation, you talk about, pedigree, and LSU has that, but as of right now, the football team they're putting on the field should not be the football team that is, a top 10 ranked team or a team that is, supposed to win the SEC. This is an LSU team that's very ho-hum, but, they're getting by on their reputation. But I think going forward, if you're LSU, you got to win out in the SEC now if you want a chance to just, even make it to the conference championship.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to take 1 foot out of the SEC, put it in the Big Ten. Indiana coming with a massive upset on the Mizzou team that we praised last week. Again, your fruit basket will be arriving later this week.
We're sorry, Mizzou. Our thoughts out to you. We definitely didn't handle that super well. We said, Mizzou is going to be a great team. They are a great team still, But obviously, when we mention it, when the kiss of death comes up, Mizzou was going to lose. And it was a shocking loss. I was following the game the entire day. I was at a lot of different things. And then when I saw Mizzou down in the fourth quarter, I'm like, there's upset potential here. And, that was proven right now. I mean, Mizzou is clearly, they clearly had a clunker this week.
Yeah, let's talk about this Indiana team. Because, these guys are by no means a powerhouse football program. You think of Indiana, you think basketball. But these guys are really resurgent. They're coming up. They're going to be quite a threat in the Big Ten, especially with teams like Ohio State, Michigan State, other team I can't think of
Penn
right
State.
now. Yes, Penn State, and then Wisconsin already coming up with losses already. So, these guys, they're legit.
Yeah, and I don't think Indiana's going to win anything anytime soon. I still think they're a couple years away at least, but I think that they have a bright future. If you're a Hoosier, you're no longer looking towards basketball season when you start classes in August.
Yeah. So, Mike, we've got to talk about the ACC. Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets coming up victorious, last-second field goal in the Battle of the Techs, beating Virginia Tech in Virginia. Mike, this was a fantastic game. I was following it on Watch ESPN on my phone right before I went into the Michigan football game, and I saw this. I'm like, Virginia Tech's going to edge them. It's a close game, but I don't think they have it in them. They proved me wrong. They came up resurgent in the fourth quarter, really charged forward, and they got that game-winning field goal.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech's a great program. Definitely, you look at their pedigree, Demaryius Thomas, Calvin Johnson, two of the biggest names in football, at the wide receiver position. Georgia Tech, having a great season so far, and an ACC team, that if you play Florida State and, they're having some trouble right now with discipline issues, I feel like, you could shock a couple people if you're Georgia Tech and, maybe string one together against one of those bigger ACC powerhouses.
Yeah, and I got to give a little love to my guy, Harrison Butker. I talked about him last season. Fantastic field goal kicker. And Mike, I said it to you, one of the things about kickers, they're usually sort of a liability if you have a kicker that's not that great. We saw that especially in the Kansas State game against Auburn. But this guy, so consistent, so dependable, that when you get into field goal range with this guy, it's like the game's over.
Exactly. And, kickers they're such an underrated aspect of a team, like you said, and they can be, as big an asset as they can a liability. And rare and very good college level kickers are hard to find. You see them at some of the bigger schools, the bigger programs. But for Georgia Tech to have a guy, as good as their kicker and as good as a guy who can put 3 points on the board when you get him within range, Brian, you can't ask for more. The game's about scoring points, and the kicker does that for you in a big way.
Yeah, definitely. So, Mike, let's shift to Berkeley, California. Funny news story coming out of Berkeley. Give us the...
So, like any team, Cal loves to support, their boosters, the people who donate, anyone who subscribes to their website wants to buy stuff. So at the end of every win, they send out an email saying, hey, congratulations, Cal won, celebrate a Bear win by, taking 10% off your next order. They sent those out a little bit prematurely, Brian, right before the Arizona Hail Mary shocked them a little bit. we got to chalk it up into the category of bad PR moves that we've talked about already earlier this year. But, Arizona, you got to talk about that on the flip side. That Hail Mary at the end, Brian, awesome play. That is why we love football.
Yeah, we don't know what the Cal fans are missing out on more, the fact that they couldn't get the deal or the fact that their team gave up 36 fourth quarter points to this Arizona team, who they really should have beaten.
Yeah, 36 fourth quarter points, Brian, that's inexcusable. 36 points giving up in general over 4 quarters is inexcusable. Cal has definitely got to do maybe a little bit of retooling on the defensive side of the ball, but if you're Arizona, you got away with one this week, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself.
Oh yeah, Arizona's definitely in a good situation right now. But Mike, let's shift to a different part of the Pac-12. Really crazy game this weekend. I'm calling it the offensive matchup of the generation. Oregon versus Washington State. I don't know what their hand symbol is, but let's check the stats in here. Marcus Mariota, 329 yards, 5 touchdowns. Connor Halliday, 436 yards, 4 touchdowns. Mike, we've seen our fair share of shootouts where you know that the last person with the ball is going to be the winner. But this is almost absurd how much offense these guys are getting.
Yeah, and I think you might want to check Marcus Mariota's back afterwards because he carried that Oregon offense the entire way. You see 5 touchdowns, you think blowout against, most of those came against, second stringers. No, this is against Washington State's first stringers. All 5 of those touchdowns mattered. Big shout out to Oregon. That's a big win. And that's a place where they could have slipped up in the past. But I love Marcus Mariota right now. His Heisman chances for me, Brian, he's the front runner right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially when you think about it. 5 touchdowns, 35 points. The amount of points Oregon scored in the game, 38 points. You said this guy's putting this team on his back. That's definitely what he's doing. And even Connor Halliday too, this Wazoo team, even though they may not be at the top of the Pac-12, their offense is absolutely insane.
Exactly. They have a great offense. You got to give it up to Washington State, supporting the Pac-12 in a big way, but if you're Washington State, you can't be too upset about this. You go up against Oregon. This is a very good team, an offensive, nightmare for a defensive coordinator, or defensive nightmare for a defensive coordinator. Jeez, I can't speak today. But I want to keep the focus on Mariota right now. Very underrated last year. I felt like, had the hype, but wasn't, that guy. He wasn't the Jameis Winston type of guy. Right now, Brian, he's elevated himself to that level with this performance.
Yeah, this isn't the first time for this Washington State team that they've run up the scoreboard, and let alone for the state of Washington. We saw Washington State in Week 1 run up the scoreboard against Rutgers. A few weeks ago, we saw Eastern Washington give UW that big old scare. So the state of Washington right now, they're lacking on defense, but definitely excelling on offense.
A surplus of points for sure. So right now, Brian, we got to talk about rising and falling stocks. Let's go. Who are your falling stocks?
All right, first of all, I got to talk about Miami, not of Ohio, Miami of Florida, the U. These guys having such a struggle this season. Couldn't come out with a win against Louisville, couldn't come out with a win against Nebraska. And Mike, this is such a respected program. It's kind of hard to see them go through this, but then again, after the hopes they had last season only to be destroyed by Florida State, these guys really have been on the fall ever since that loss.
Yeah, and they're definitely in a rebuilding phase, and that's all I can say. I talked about it with Indiana, who's on the uptick. Miami, they're a couple years away, I think at least. So you got to start with good recruiting. You got to recruit better players, implement a better offense, I feel like. And, maybe the U will return to relevance then.
Yeah, definitely. So, Mike, I'm going to talk about the SEC a little bit. My Auburn Tigers, that first half was painful to watch. The Auburn wide receivers could not hang on to the passes. These guys are coming from an offense that was so successful of being run-based, with Trey Mason, Nick Marshall. Last year, they were so successful. And now they're exploring the passing option, and they're showing promise. But if they hit you in the hands and you can't run with it, if you just drop it, you're not going to win football games.
Exactly, and you got to help out a guy like Nick Marshall, who's not a finished product at quarterback by any means. You got to build his confidence. You got to catch those passes for him, so you can take a couple of deep shots later in the game, maybe and score some big plays, big points off of that. But if you're the Auburn wide receivers, you might be running sprints at practice today.
Oh yeah, and definitely let's talk about the K-State offense too, come to think of it, because we as Colorado people know that the closer you get to the summit, the harder it is to breathe. Kansas State, when they got near the stomach, couldn't breathe at all. These guys were choking whenever they were in Auburn territory. Their first, I think about 5 drives were interception, fumble, 2 missed field goals, and then a punt. That is not a way to win football games, especially if you're throwing interceptions in the end zone, missing field goals that are shorter than 40 yards. You just cannot win football games. You can't expect to hold that number 20 position that Kansas State has.
That's not a way to win anything, actually, Brian. You're scoring 0 points there, pretty much. And you gotta, when you're down on the other team's side of the field, you gotta score. When you get that many opportunities, you have to come up with points. I don't care if it's field goals. You need to have some kind of tangible result. and missed field goals will kill you. All that stuff, Brian, is not going to be good. You can't turn it over on the other team's side of the field. You just can't.
Yeah, but let's move it on to the upward trend side. Mike, give us our rising stocks.
Rising stock, East Carolina, big win this week. Love what I'm seeing out of this program. Brian, tell me more.
These guys come with some massive upsets against ACC teams, beating Virginia Tech, beating North Carolina, actually smashing North Carolina, putting something in the name of 70 points up there on them. I mean, these are the guys, these are showing the promise of the Northern Illinois we saw with Jordan Lynch. These guys are so talented, and no one really cares that they're from a small school because if you doubt them coming into their stadium, you will lose. They are just knocking over everyone.
Definitely do not want to doubt those East Carolina Pirates, Brian. Great team. And you talk about the comparisons to Northern Illinois from last year. They have a team that they may not make the playoff now with this new format, but we'll definitely see them. If they continue this trend going forward, maybe in a lesser bowl game, maybe they'll face off against a big school and do a little upset action. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, so let's conclude with your Knowles. Big story out of Tallahassee. Give us a lowdown, Mike.
Sean McGuire. I love it. I love Sean McGuire. Keeping the Knowles hope alive. I want to talk about Florida State. Their stock is on the uptick so much. They proved that they can win without Jameis Winston. It's going to be tough, and it's going to be ugly, and you're going to turn the ball over, but the defense can win. The defense can help win. The offense can support, the parts that Jameis is, taking away with him not playing. I love it, Brian. If you're Florida State right now, you're feeling pretty good, but you got to deal with Jameis Winston. You got to deal with the discipline issues as of right now. That's unacceptable kind of behavior, especially for a quarterback of Winston's caliber, a guy who could be one of the top players in the NFL and in college football.
Yeah, it was a great affirmation from Sean McGuire because Florida State's such a big-time football program. You're wondering if Fisher's going to be in that point where he's like, got to keep this guy disciplined, but we can't move without him. Throw that scale right out the window. You got depth at Florida State. And honestly, I was wrong going back to the beginning of the season when I said Florida State cannot be that #1 team since they don't have Kelvin Benjamin. They're not well-rounded enough. I stand in the state of being wrong. Mike, you stand in the state of being right. Florida State's still #1, still rocking.
Definitely love it. And Brian, I got to conclude on the topic of Sean McGuire, my favorite quarterback in the history of this week. I definitely say he deserves a shout out. You come in, you fill the big shoes in Jameis Winston. You go out there, you beat Clemson, you put up a good performance. You do all the right things. He stayed within himself. The 2 interceptions, we can talk about those later. That's all, off to the side. McGuire did his job, stepped up in a big way, filled the role perfectly. Brian, I love it. I love it.
And on that note, we're going to end this episode for this week. So thank you very much for watching.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Carlson.
I'm Brian Heisenbuttle. See you next week.
We'll see you later.